Being a Christian in a new reality. So how do we do that? Hi, my name is Mark van Straten. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Delighted to be with you today. I'm sitting here in my office. I have got a beautiful sea view and I've got my little studio here set up. I've got my phone up there, so to give you an overview and to give you some context of my environment, and I'm delighted that you'll be joining me for the next few minutes as I speak about how to be a Christian in a new reality. When this COVID thing hit us, nobody saw it coming, and it has changed everything about how we do church, in fact, how we do life. And one of the words that have just been very prominent in this last few months has been this word pivot. People have had to pivot. People have to change the way they work, the way in which they conduct their connections with one another. And those of us who are in church work or go to church or part of a church, this has had a dramatic impact on us, because the very heart of Christianity is about being in person. It's about relationships. It's about connections. It's connecting to God. It's connecting to others. It's connecting to the world that we live in. And it's connecting to our purpose and what we are for. So how do we do that? I know that in business, I know that people have spoken about how their businesses have changed, how people have gone online, how restaurants have improvised and they've done other stuff with their ovens, how people have made a way in this incredibly difficult and hard time. And I wonder how you're doing, how are you coping with all that's going on around about us here. So today I want to just take a few minutes and share some thoughts with you, and just give you some context to how I think we will respond as Christians. I do think this could be one of the greatest moments for Christianity, because as Christians we're going to have to recalibrate, we have to pivot about how we express our faith, how we connect with one another, because let's face it, Christianity hasn't really changed for 2,000 years. Right from the start of the church, back in the book of Acts, Pentecost, churches have met in large groups, they've congregated together, and essentially they've done three things. They've sung together, they've listened to a message together, they've read the Word of God together. And Christians have been doing that in a variety of different ways for thousands of years, and they've generally met on Sundays. On top of that, Christians then will meet during the course of the week in smaller groups. We love to say that life change takes place in small groups, in connectedness. And then, of course, we do things together in fulfilling the mission, the mandate that God has called us to do. Now, all of a sudden, that's changed. Everything has changed. So as I share a few thoughts with you and give you some context, maybe I'll be able to help you to rediscover your faith, rediscover your expression of Christianity in a new reality. Before I do that, I'm going to give you a bit of this context, as I said. And what I'm going to be doing today, I'm going to be using my favorite little whiteboard. I haven't used it for a long time, but I'm going to be using it today. So I'll be back in a second. So here I am. So I'm going to try to get my whiteboard into frame. But what I want to say is that when I talk about Christians, I'm talking about a large group of Christians, kind of Christians. And right now, in my opinion, Christians can possibly fall into three categories. So the first category is probably 10 to 15% of people, and I would put those people in are people who have fallen out with the church. They've got nothing to do with Christianity. They're tired of the church. They've been burnt. They've been disappointed. They've been let down, and I understand that. But I'm not really speaking about that group of people right now. There's another sort of 10 to 15% of people over here who, their view of how the church should meet is possibly in small groups and homes. They don't necessarily believe in buildings or full-time pastors, or really institutionally they don't really believe in the church. But there's another sort of 70 to 80% of the people who, for the most part, they reflect on their Christianity in those three areas of gathering together, of connecting midweek, and fulfilling some divine purpose that God has called them to do. And today, for this purpose, I'm really just focusing on this group right here. Now, of course, if people in this group want to tie into this, I'm sure it's going to benefit them, and I'm sure something's going to be helpful about that as well. Now, what does the church actually do? And I just want to paint another picture for you as to how the church functions and how it works. To do this, we sometimes refer to Jesus as our prophet, priest, and king, and there's verses around that to imply that. So if we take those things and I've divided kind of into three areas, and we have this triangle that's divided into three areas. We have the prophetic, and the prophetic is that area which is divinely inspired. It's got to do with the direction of the church, the mission of the church. It's got to do with the inspiration. So sometimes preachers on Sundays, their messages will be prophetic, not telling what the future is going to be, but inspiring people to move to their future. The second area is the priesthood, and that's really about taking care of people. It's about equipping people. It's about pastoral work. It's about sharing and caring and small groups and all that kind of stuff. And then there's this area of where we speak about being the king. And there's an institutional side to being a Christian, and that has to do with we meet in buildings. And if we meet in buildings, we need to switch the lights on. We need to pay for the lights. There are certain laws we have to subscribe to. We've got to, and in this country, we've got to be a non-profit organization and a public benefit organization, and it has to do with transparency of our finances. Now, in church work, when the church is only prophetic and these two other areas are neglected, the church will be out of balance. It will be kind of a church with an overemphasis on one area and not another area. If it's only in the priestly sense, it's all about sharing and caring, then it becomes navel gazing, it becomes inward looking. If it's only about the functions of the institution, then it becomes about money and all that kind of stuff. So those are the sort of areas in which church works. When we think about it, that we as churches essentially functioned in person. Now suddenly COVID comes and all of that breaks. There's a complete cutoff. Now, as I've come in reflecting on that, for me, Christians potentially fit into maybe three rough categories. First of all, there are Christians who are happy for us to meet online. So what happened, of course, when COVID came in and we couldn't gather in groups again, we immediately went online and we pivoted immediately. And we have spent a lot of time as leaders figuring out how to do church really well in an online space. And we've considered all the impacts and the ramifications thereof. But nevertheless, boom, we turned around and we went onto the online space. Now, what happened there was that, first of all, we see that people were committed, especially in the early part of COVID. They would meet at 9 o'clock and we would stream the service. I know some people that would actually physically dress up to go to church. Now, I know there are a bunch of us, and there are a bunch of you, me included, enjoy the worship. It kind of washes over us, and we sitting there in our tracksuit pants or our pajamas or whatever, and that's perfectly fine. And some people are saying to me, I love it. I love going to church because I don't have to dress up and I can just, have my breakfast while I'm engaging in church. And that's part of the deal. We understand that. But that's the first kind of people. There's a second type of Christian that, for me, I call it they went into orbit. In other words, they just began to circle and do their normal stuff of life. And they basically said, I don't really connect to this online thing and I don't really want to do that. So what I'm going to do is that when we get back to in-person gatherings again, I'll go back to church. And that's fine. That's a certain aspect as well. And there's a third type of person who just kind of lost connection. Their whole commitment to church in the beginning was a little bit dodgy, and now they're just finding disconnection and they've lost interest. And maybe things have happened to them in their lives, and so they're living in this contradiction. They're living in the reality of an uncertain world. Even though we say these words that the church is not a building, it's a people, the fact of the matter is the way we've expressed our Christianity, the way we have demonstrated it, has predominantly been connected to a building or connected to a Sunday service, an in-person gathering, and that sort of forms the stone in the pond, and the ripple effect goes out from there. And so for most of us, as much as we know that the church is not a building, the reality is the building has played a highly functional place. And it needed to, because it's an in-person gathering. That's how things work. What do you have to do as a Christian to be a Christian that will help you, even when we get back to in-person gathering, what will help you? Now, I'm not going to try to do this all in one vlog. I'm probably going to spread this over 2 vlogs. We'll see how far we get today and how much time it takes. But I want to share with you a couple of thoughts about what you can do as a Christian who needs to pivot, just as much as you've pivoted in your work, in your school kids, in your leisure, in your exercise, in your work. We have to pivot how we're going to connect to the purpose and the vision and the mission of being a church that has an identity, that has a sense of community and a sense of purpose. So here are some thoughts that I want to share with you. And the first thing that I think we need to pivot as Christians, and how to be a Christian in an uncertain time, how to be connected to the mission and the purpose of a church in an uncertain time, because the mission of the church is God's idea. We can't be Christians in isolation. We need to be connected to one another. And right now, our in-person connections are really, really hard. So step number 1, the first thing in my opinion that we really have to get absolutely clear about is that we have to pivot. We have to realize for what we've done in the past is not necessarily going to help us to take us forward and take us into a new area. And COVID has forced us, in a sense, as Christians, to take responsibility in how we're going to participate, how we're going to respond, how we're going to connect to God, how we're going to connect to each other, and how we're going to connect to some missional purpose, some form of generativeness. So for me, the first thing is the pivot. You've got to change your mind. You've got to realize that in the past, perhaps we've drawn a lot from Sunday gatherings. We've drawn a lot from the fact of in-person gatherings. But we need to realize that those days, for the time being, are not going to be as they used to be. We're in a new reality and things have changed. So that's the first. Secondly, is in the area of relationship. Everything about Christianity is about a relationship. A relationship with God, a relationship with others, a relationship with people who aren't Christians, a relationship with people who are different to you, a relationship with the world in which we live, the relationship with our government. Our Christianity affects all of those things. And we need to realize that Christianity is relationship based. And the fact of the matter is that we have social distancing. We have limited numbers of people that can gather together. We're not supposed to visit our families and gather in small groups. So what we have to do, I think, around this in the pivot, we've got to do an inventory of how we can gather and how we can stay connected. It's absolutely essential that we stay connected. So as much as it is a temptation not to connect with people, as much as it's a temptation not to gather with people on Sunday, you must understand that when we gather on a Sunday morning and we stream a service, there are hundreds of other people, even thousands of other people who are also sitting in the lounge, maybe on their own or with a bunch of people, but nevertheless, we need to be conscious that we're connected with others. Then what we do is we take an inventory of the people that we need to be connected to. And here's the kicker. I've listened to a message by Andy Stanley, and I loved what he said. What do we do in those relationships? How do we connect within those relationships? Well, the first thing, we need to take the responsibility. You and I need to take responsibility to see ourselves as something to offer somebody else. It's not what is in for, what do I get out of it? It's what can I bring to others. And as much as we are potentially operating on minimum energy, minimum effort, just to put pause on for a moment, I have this kind of theory. If you had to take, for example, how much cope you have. What do I mean by cope? So when I talk about cope, I'm talking about the ability to cope with what's going on. Now, in normal life, in everyday life, our ability to cope, maybe sitting up here, if this is a jar and 100% is like, you're just a Superman, you can do everything, nobody's ever effort to you, there's 100%. Maybe we generally cope around about 70 or 80. I mean, I meet people that say, Mark, I just can't cope anymore. My kids, the finances, my job, the government, blah, 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 blah. So I reckon let's just say our average cope level is 70% in normal life, in what we used to call normal. I reckon we've dropped about 15 to 20% just in our cope. That our capacity to cope is sitting around about 50 to 60%. So we already start every single day with a little less energy. So for me, that's a realization that I have a limited amount of cope, and therefore how I connect is really important, because here's the deal. We're going to find some people that as we serve them, as we pastor them, as we shepherd them, as we are kind to them, as we express love toward them, as we find out to them, and you're going to find that you'll be rewarded, that you'll find your own energy when you take in a sense, the focus, the attention of yourself and put it onto somebody else and think about somebody else's need. There's somebody who's worse off than you. And here's the thing that Andy Stanley said. It's no more than just dropping a message, a WhatsApp message to them or writing an email. It's about people hearing your voice. And if we'll make the effort to either voice note or to call people that we know are struggling or people that we are connected with and make that human connection and bring some sort of heart towards that, some sort of empathy. May I pray for you? Can I pray for us? Dear Lord, help us cope in this situation. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Your Christianity is going to go up a notch or two. Your ability to minister to somebody else. I recently posted a podcast, some of you may have heard it, on what to do when you're in a slump. And when I realized that I had gone into a slump, and what I discovered in my slump is that my creativity went, my desire to get out, to exercise, to eat healthily, all of that began to be diminished in my slump. And then I heard a message, and I heard Tom's message, and I heard a message by a chap by the name of Chris Hodges. And two things struck me from Chris Hodges. He said, choose joy, and secondly, do ministry. And every morning I wake up, hey, it's not easy. I say, today I'm going to choose joy. And when something goes wrong with Christine, I say, I'm going to choose joy. And man, like I say, it doesn't always work. But I tell you what, it does begin to reframe, to rewire your brain, to bring those neural pathways more in line with what's in your heart relationship. The third thing, and the final thing I'm going to share today, and I'll share some more points in the next vlog, is this. We need to realize that for what the church can do, the institution, your pastors, your teachers, what they can do is provide you with content. And we see content everywhere and all over the place. And I know we as a church are seeking to be more specific with our content. But the fact of the matter is that there's content. And I think it's brilliant. I think it's great. We don't have to like all the content. But here's the deal. I think every single one of us have to ask ourselves a few questions. And the questions we can ask ourselves is, number one, what does this content mean to me? How's this impacting my life? What is in this word, in this delivery of content, because that's essentially what we can do as the institution, as the church, your pastors are doing. They're putting great effort into how do we deliver the content. The response from a Christian's point of view and how to be a Christian in difficult times, in uncertain times. How you use your content, how you give clarity to the content will determine how you live your life as a Christian. And so we ask the question, what stood out for me? What is God saying to me to it? Secondly, we say, who can I share this content with that'll make a difference? And that's not just to go post a share on YouTube or on Facebook. No, it's to write a specific email to somebody that you think will benefit from the content. And what you do is you write them a note and you say to them something along these lines. As I was listening to this message, as I was listening to this devotion, I thought of you. And I thought, man, this has blessed me so much. It may bless you as well. Now, sometimes when we share content, we send a hint to people to change to be a better person. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that the content that we're being given, that comes to us. I mean, I've had the privilege of listening to a lot of preachers during this lockdown period. And without fail, there's always something that strikes me, that encourages me. And inevitably, I get to share some of that with others. I get to share it sometimes with Christine, and we talk about it, and we reflect on it, we meditate it, because we have time and opportunity, in a sense, to meditate the content, to share the content, to chew on the content, and then to share the content, to share it with somebody else. Hey, I hope this helps a little bit on what it means to be a Christian and how to be a Christian in uncertain times. Uncertainty is with us for a while. We don't know how long. We are uncertain how long the uncertainty there. But the thing that is certain is the uncertainty. And the gift that we can give to ourselves is the clarity of what to do. We need to pivot. We need to be sure that we're connected relationally. And thirdly is how we deliver content and how we use content. Hey, God bless you. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I'd love you to subscribe to my channel down below here. Just press the subscribe button. Tinkle the little bell that when I post, you'll get a reminder. You'll get a notification. And I'd love you to share this content with other Christians who you may know are struggling with their Christianity right now. So God bless you. Have a great day, great week. And see you on vlog number 2 or podcast number 2 around how to be a Christian in uncertain times. God bless you.